There are scars that never heal, no matter how hard you try. We all have wounds, but some of them aren't visible. They hide deep inside, hidden beneath the surface. The ones that come from love, control, and pain, they linger long after the moments have passed, shaping who we are. This is my story. A story about a girl, a mother, and the scars that time can't erase. It's not just about growing up. It's about surviving the love that tried to suffocate me. Welcome to my truth. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a young woman stepping into adulthood. I see a lost girl, full of wounds in her soul that will never heal. Scars that can't be erased, no matter how many ways I try to hide them. And my mother, the one I always thought would love me with all her heart, turns out to be the one who created these scars. I didn't realize it at first. When I was younger, everything seemed so simple. My mom was my protector, taking care of me every meal, every night's sleep. She was the first to come to me when I was sick, when I was afraid. But then, one day, I realized that her love wasn't just care. It was control. And as I grew older, I began to feel that suffocation creeping in, slowly turning into a pain I couldn't put into words. By the time I was 15, I didn't know that love could turn into a cage. A cage I couldn't escape from, no matter how much I wanted to. I always heard my mom say, "I'm doing this for you." But did anyone ever ask me if I wanted it? Did anyone ask me if I agreed to live under that kind of restraint? My mom always thought she knew what was best for me, but the truth was, she was only reflecting her own fear. A mother, with a heart full of anxiety, who couldn't bear to see her child escape from her control. My mom, the one I thought could never be weak, turned out to be a victim of control and pain herself. You've probably heard stories about kids growing up under the overwhelming protection of their parents. But my story isn't a sweet one about a mother's love. It's a story about mental abuse. It's a story of invisible wounds, of long-lasting harm that no one can see. And the hardest part is, I can't blame my mom. I understand, she did it because she loves me. But is that the kind of love I needed? Do I have to pay the price for my mom's choices for the rest of my life? When I was 17, I tried to break free. I started to date a boy in my class. He wasn't like my other friends, he was lively, free-spirited, living in his own world. He introduced me to a life I never thought I'd know, a life without my mother's control. But then, everything fell apart. My mom found out, and as usual, she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, and I knew she no longer saw me as the daughter she loved. I was just a stranger in my own home. Mom didn't say anything about me dating, but her gaze was enough to choke me. It was a look filled with disappointment, like I had betrayed her. A look I'll never forget. And then, I went back to living in her control. But I couldn't keep going. I couldn't live without having space to be myself. I couldn't keep running in the shadow of my mom. But have you ever wondered, can kids like me ever escape the shadow of their parents? Or will we always carry those scars, no matter how hard we try to forget? I don't know the answer. But I'm certain of one thing, when we face our own wounds, when we confront the control we can't understand, one day, we'll have to face ourselves. My mom wasn't a bad person. But her love was something I could never understand. Was that love destroying me? Can I ever escape my mother's shadow, or will I live forever in the pain of scars that never heal? I don't know. But I'm going to tell you my story, because I can't keep it inside any longer. The story of a girl and her mother, and the scars that can never be erased. When I was younger, I never thought love could hurt. My mom was always there for me, from the moment I was born to when I began to have my own thoughts. She was my protector, shielding me from the outside world. I believed that she always knew what was best for me. But the truth is, my mother's love wasn't care as I thought. It was control. She was always there with me, every hour, every minute. When I went to school, she was the first to pick me up. When I played outside, she was always watching from afar, ensuring I wasn't doing anything dangerous. At first, I didn't think much of it. I just thought she loved me, and that's what every parent does. But when I turned 15, everything began to change. I started to feel that her control wasn't just love but a way for her to keep me bound to her. Every time I wanted to hang out with friends, my mom would find a reason to stop me. She'd say she couldn't let me go far, that no one could take care of me the way she did. I started to feel like I was living in a prison, where every move I made was under surveillance. I wanted some freedom, space to breathe, to live my own life. I wanted friends, I wanted to date, I wanted to try new things. But those things turned into nightmares. My mom was always there, never leaving, always interfering with my decisions. I couldn't do anything without her. That feeling was heavy. I didn't know if I was a rebellious child or if I just wanted a little space to live my life. I couldn't stand it anymore, living under this constant control. Then, when I turned 17, I met someone special. He wasn't like the friends my mom would approve of. He was free, living his life on his own terms. He opened up a whole new world to me, a world I never thought I'd know, a life without my mom's control. He wasn't like the safe people my mom would want me to be friends with. He wasn't the kind of person she could control. But he showed me that I could live a different life. A life where I could make my own decisions, without the chains of my mother's restrictions. And then, everything fell apart. My mom found out I was dating. At that point, I didn't know what to do, because I knew my mom would never accept it. She didn't say anything, just remained silent. But in her eyes, I saw disappointment. I didn't know what she was disappointed about. Was it because I dared to love? Was it because I wanted to live my own life? Or was it because I had betrayed her? That feeling was awful. I couldn't describe it in words. A girl trying to find freedom, only to be stopped by her own mother. She didn't say anything, but I knew she was heartbroken. And then, I went back to living under her control. But I couldn't keep going. I couldn't live without having space to be myself. I couldn't keep running in her shadow. But have you ever wondered, can children like me ever escape their parents' shadow? Or will we always carry those scars, no matter how hard we try to forget? I don't know the answer. But one thing I'm sure of is, when we face our own wounds, when we confront the control we can't understand, one day, we'll have to face ourselves. My mom wasn't a bad person. But her love was something I could never understand. Was that love destroying me? Can I ever escape my mother's shadow, or will I live forever in the pain of scars that never heal? I don't know. But I'm going to tell you my story because I can't keep it inside any longer. The story of a girl and her mother, and the scars that can never be erased. The more I tried to explain to my mom, the more I realized that no matter what I said, it wouldn't change anything. I wasn't just fighting to be understood, I was fighting for my freedom, my identity, and a chance to live the life I wanted. But the more I fought, the more I felt like I was sinking in a sea of disappointment. My mom's love wasn't the kind of love that encouraged me to grow, it was the kind that demanded loyalty, obedience, and control. Every decision I made that wasn't in line with what she wanted was met with a harsh silence or a lecture that felt like a verdict. It wasn't about what was best for me anymore, it was about what was best for her, what was easiest for her to control. I started to notice little things. Like the way she'd check my phone when I wasn't home. Or the way she'd read my journal when I left it lying around. At first, I brushed it off. She's just being a protective mother, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. This wasn't about love, this was about power. I could feel the walls closing in around me. Every time I tried to push back, every time I tried to pull away, my mom would find a way to pull me back in. She would guilt-trip me, remind me of everything she had done for me, and use her past, the struggles she went through as a young woman, to justify the way she treated me. She would say, "I've been through so much, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did." And I'd sit there, stunned. Was she right? Was I really making mistakes, or was I just trying to live my life? It was in those moments that I began to feel lost. I started to question everything. Was I being too rebellious? Was I really just a selfish daughter who didn't appreciate the sacrifices my mom made for me? Or was my mom holding on to me so tightly because she was scared? Scared of losing me? Scared of the idea that I could live a life without her? The emotional toll it took on me was unbearable at times. I found myself becoming more withdrawn, less willing to talk, to share my feelings. I didn't know how to deal with the internal conflict that was eating me up inside. I loved my mom. I truly did. But I also hated what she was doing to me. She wasn't allowing me to grow. She wasn't letting me breathe. One day, I made a decision. I had to break free. I couldn't keep living in this bubble of suffocating love. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when every part of me felt trapped. I decided to leave. Not forever, but just long enough to figure out who I really was. To figure out what I wanted for my life, without my mom's influence dictating every move I made. I packed my bags and went to stay with a friend. It wasn't easy. Leaving home felt like I was abandoning my mom, like I was betraying her. But it was the only way I could regain some sense of control over my life. It wasn't about rejecting her love, it was about rejecting the version of love that was hurting me. That night, when I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear because I knew my mom would never understand. Relief because for the first time in years, I was doing something for myself, something that wasn't dictated by her. And as I sat there in my friend's room, I couldn't help but think, was this what freedom felt like? Or was I just making a huge mistake? The next few days were a blur of emotions. I missed my mom. I missed the comfort of home, even though I knew it wasn't truly comfortable. But every time I thought about going back, I remembered why I left in the first place. I needed to figure out who I was without being trapped by her expectations. It wasn't until I had some distance that I realized the truth. I wasn't angry with my mom. I was angry with myself. Angry that I had let myself live in fear for so long. Angry that I had let her control me without ever questioning it. I began to realize something else too. My mom wasn't doing this out of malice. She was doing it because she loved me. But that love had been twisted into something toxic. Something that had trapped both of us. I didn't hate her. I didn't resent her. But I knew that if I ever wanted to live my own life, I had to find a way to break free from the chains of her control. And I didn't know how long it would take, or if I would ever fully escape. But I knew that if I didn't try, I would lose myself forever. And so, I began to rebuild. Piece by piece. One step at a time. I started with the small things. Choosing what I wore, who I spent time with, what I wanted to do with my life. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. It was my choice. But every now and then, I would find myself thinking about my mom. And every time I thought about her, I wondered, could we ever find a way to understand each other? Would she ever see me as my own person, separate from her? Would she ever let go of the control she had over me? I didn't know the answers. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't keep living in the shadow of someone else's expectations. I had to find my own way, even if it meant facing the pain of leaving behind what I thought was love. And maybe, just maybe, one day, I could find a way to heal. For both of us. Days passed, and with every new moment I spent away from my mom, I found myself growing both stronger and more conflicted. The initial rush of freedom was starting to wear off, and I was faced with the stark reality of the space I had created between us. It wasn't just physical distance anymore, it was emotional, too. Every time I thought I might reach out, I hesitated, afraid that reconnecting would just bring the same old cycle of control and disappointment. I started to feel like I was losing her, not just as a mother, but as someone I could ever understand. She had always been there, holding on so tightly, that I never got the chance to truly get to know her as a person. I had grown up under her watchful eye, but now, with that same eye fixed elsewhere, I began to realize that I knew almost nothing about who she was beyond being my mother. In some ways, this realization was freeing. I could finally see her as a woman, flawed, hurt, and human. She was more than just my mother. But in other ways, it was devastating. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to return to the life I had before. What would it look like for me, knowing that I couldn't go back to the same relationship we once had? The one where she controlled every step I made, even when I didn't want to be controlled. One evening, after several days of silence, my mom called. The sound of her voice on the other end of the line caught me off guard. It had been weeks since we'd spoken, and I had avoided answering her calls for fear of what would happen next. "Are you okay?" Her voice sounded different, more fragile than I remembered. "I've been thinking about you a lot, and I want to understand. Please, just talk to me." I paused. My heart was racing. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to say something harsh, to demand that she understand the pain she had caused. But in the quiet space of that phone call, I realized something else. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about healing, whether for her, for me, or for both of us. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm just figuring things out," I replied, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. I needed space. "I don't think I can go back to how things were. You don't understand how much you controlled me, how much I felt trapped." There was a long silence on the other end. I could practically hear the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her, the same way they had weighed on me for so long. "I didn't know you felt that way," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't realize I was pushing you away." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, feeling the enormity of her confession. She hadn't known. She hadn't understood. In her own mind, she had been trying to protect me from the world, but in doing so, she had created a world where I couldn't breathe, where I couldn't live. "You never gave me a chance to be myself," I said, my voice steady now, no longer hiding the hurt. "You never let me make mistakes or learn from them. I needed to make my own choices, even if they were the wrong ones. But you always told me what to do, what was safe, what was right. I thought it was my job to protect you from making the same mistakes I did," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't want you to hurt. I didn't want you to struggle like I did." And there it was. The heart of it. My mother wasn't trying to control me because she hated me. She wasn't trying to hold me back because she didn't care. She was scared. Scared of me facing the world, scared of me repeating her mistakes, scared of me suffering the way she had suffered. "I know, Mom. But I can't live like that. I need to live for myself now, even if I make mistakes. That's how I'll grow." Her breath caught in her throat, and for the first time, I felt her vulnerability. She wasn't just the mother who controlled me, she was a woman who had once been young, uncertain, and afraid. She was someone who, despite her strength, was still broken by her past and was trying to protect me from the same pain she had endured. There was no magic answer to all of this. There was no easy way to heal the wounds, no simple way to fix the broken pieces of our relationship. But as I spoke to my mom that night, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about blaming her. This wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about us both understanding that we were both victims of the same thing, fear. Fear of losing each other, fear of failing, fear of the unknown. And so, with that understanding, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I told her I loved her. "I love you, Mom. But I need you to let me go." It wasn't the end of our story. It wasn't some grand conclusion where everything magically got better. But it was the start of something new. A new chapter. One where we would both have to learn how to trust again, how to rebuild what had been torn apart. When I hung up the phone that night, I didn't feel relief or closure. What I felt was the quiet hum of possibility. We weren't done. But maybe, just maybe, we could both heal. Together. Apart. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we were both willing to try. And for the first time, I believed that was enough. The road ahead was still unclear, but one thing was certain, I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid to live for myself, and I wasn't afraid to face whatever came next. Because for the first time in a long time, I was finally free. And maybe, just maybe, so was she. It's strange how, after that conversation with my mom, things didn't just magically get better. We didn't suddenly understand each other perfectly, and the hurt didn't vanish. But there was a shift, a quiet understanding between us that we weren't enemies. We didn't need to be. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without her hovering over me, and maybe, just maybe, she felt the same. In the weeks that followed, I tried to live for myself. It wasn't easy. Every decision I made felt like an uphill battle, every step forward accompanied by a gnawing feeling of guilt. The guilt of leaving her behind, the guilt of not following the path she had planned for me. But I also felt something else, a sense of freedom that I had longed for. I began making decisions on my own, no longer bound by her rules, no longer following the script she had written for me. But even with this newfound freedom, something lingered. I still couldn't quite shake the feeling that I was disappointing her, that I was somehow betraying her love by wanting to live my own life. I still wanted her approval, but now, it felt like I was chasing something that was never going to come. I wanted her to see me as an individual, not just as her daughter who had to follow her orders. One afternoon, I received a letter from my mom. It wasn't a long letter, but its words hit harder than anything she'd ever said to me. "Dear, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I know I've been too controlling, and I see now that I pushed you away when I was just trying to protect you. I didn't know how to let go, how to trust that you could make your own choices. But I realize now that I've made mistakes, and I'm sorry. I just want you to be happy, to be free. I may not understand everything, but I'm trying to. Please know that no matter what, I'll always love you." Reading those words, I felt a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying begin to lift. My mom had finally acknowledged what I had been feeling all this time. She hadn't just heard me, but she had begun to understand. And while it wasn't a perfect resolution, it was the first step toward healing. But then, in the quiet of that moment, I realized something else. I had been waiting for her to change for so long that I had forgotten that I, too, had changed. I had grown. I had learned to be more than just her daughter. I had learned to be me. And for the first time, I felt proud of that. Still, the question remained, could I forgive her? Could I really let go of the years of pain, the years of feeling trapped? Could I finally let go of the anger that had built up inside of me for so long? I wanted to. I knew I had to, not just for her but for myself. Holding on to that anger had been weighing me down, poisoning my thoughts, my decisions. It had kept me in the past, stuck in a version of her and me that wasn't real anymore. So, I decided to take the next step. I called my mom. "Mom, I got your letter," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I just wanted to say, I forgive you." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, hear the tears she was trying to hold back. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said, "I know you didn't. But we can't keep living in the past. We both have to move forward." For the first time in years, I felt a true sense of peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because everything was perfect, but because we were finally facing the truth. We were finally being honest with each other. For once, we weren't pretending that everything was okay. We were acknowledging the pain, the mistakes, and the love that still existed between us, even after all the hurt. "I love you, Mom," I said softly. "And I want to build a new kind of relationship. One where we both have the space to be who we are, to be real." "I love you too, sweetheart," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And I promise, I'm going to try. I'm going to let you be you." And with that, a new chapter began. The road ahead was still uncertain. There were still going to be bumps, moments of tension, and old patterns that would try to resurface. But we were different now. I wasn't the same girl I was when I first left home, and my mom wasn't the same person either. We had both learned something important, that love isn't about control, and it isn't about sacrifice at the cost of your own identity. It's about growth, about understanding that both of us are individuals, both with our own paths to walk. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was a beginning. A beginning of letting go of the past and making space for a future that was ours to shape, together and apart. And in that moment, I realized that the scars I had carried for so long weren't something to hide. They were part of my journey, part of the healing that had begun. The past no longer had a hold on me. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free to be who I was. Free to love without fear. Free to live for myself. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate balancing act. My mom and I, now on a path of tentative understanding, were slowly learning how to coexist in a way that didn't involve control or suffocation. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its moments of doubt. The old habits, the ones where she tried to intervene in every choice I made, kept creeping back in. But this time I was different. I had changed. I wasn't the same person who had felt small under her constant gaze. I had a voice now. I had my own opinions, and I wasn't afraid to use them. But even with that newfound strength, there was still a quiet ache inside me. There was still a piece of me that wanted to curl up into the comfort of my mother's embrace, to be the child who didn't have to make difficult choices, who didn't have to carry the burden of forging her own way. In moments of weakness, I found myself wishing I could just forget the past and go back to the way things were, to the days when everything was simpler, even if it was suffocating. One night, as I sat in my room, staring out the window at the moonlit sky, I received a message from my mom. It was a simple text, one that I had been both dreading and longing for at the same time. I miss you. I know it's been hard, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. I see the woman you're becoming, and I'm learning to let go. My heart twisted as I read those words. I knew they were sincere, but they also held so much weight. In them, I heard the echo of the same woman who had held me so tightly, the same woman who had feared letting me go, and yet here she was, trying to do just that. Let me go. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to say something deep, something profound, but I didn't know how. I didn't know if I was ready to say everything I had been feeling. So instead, I closed my phone and laid back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the things we had been through, the fights, the silent treatments, the hurtful words we had thrown at each other, and the way I had felt trapped. But now, as I reflected on it all, I realized something important. My mom's actions, her control, weren't just a way to hurt me. They were her way of coping with her own fears, her own scars. She didn't know how to love me without trying to shape me into the person she thought I should be. And I didn't know how to love her without resenting her for it. But we were both learning. That was when I understood, forgiveness wasn't just for her, it was for me, too. I had to forgive her if I ever wanted to fully move on. I had to forgive myself for holding on to anger for so long. For letting the past define my relationship with her. The next day, I sat down and wrote her a letter. I wasn't sure what would come of it, but I knew I needed to say these things, even if they were just for me. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know I've been distant, and I know it's hard for both of us. But I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I know you were trying to protect me, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. I've been angry, and I've been hurt, but I don't want to carry that anger anymore. I want to move forward. I want to build something new between us, something healthy, something real. I'm not the same girl I was when I left, and I know you're not the same woman either. I love you, and I'm trying to understand you. I hope we can both learn to let go of the past and make space for the future. It wasn't the perfect letter. It wasn't the perfect answer to everything that had happened, but it was a step. A step towards healing. A step towards rebuilding what had been broken. I sent the message, and almost immediately, my phone buzzed with a reply. I love you, too. More than you know. I'll always be here for you, no matter what. Let's take this one step at a time, together. I couldn't stop the tears from coming as I read her response. They weren't tears of anger or resentment. They were tears of relief. Of hope. Of knowing that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance to heal. A chance to rebuild. In the following months, we continued to learn, both separately and together. We started having honest conversations, the kind we had never had before. Conversations about our fears, our hopes, and the things that had hurt us. There were still moments of tension, moments when the old patterns would try to resurface. But now, we recognized them. We called them out. We didn't let them control us. We found new ways to be a mother and daughter, ways that didn't involve control or suffocation. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly seen by her. Not as the child she wanted me to be, but as the person I had become. As I reflect on everything, I realize that our relationship, like the rest of life, is a journey. It's not about a perfect ending or a fairy tale resolution. It's about growth, forgiveness, and the willingness to try, even when things seem impossible. Maybe we'll never fully understand each other. Maybe there will always be scars, old wounds that never completely heal. But what I've learned is that love isn't about perfection. It's about acceptance. It's about being able to look at each other and say, I see you. I understand you. And I'm still here. And for the first time, I believe that's enough. The months that followed felt like a quiet restoration, small, subtle changes that, over time, made a big difference. My mom and I weren't fixed. We didn't suddenly find perfect harmony. But we found something new, something unexpected, peace. It wasn't an overnight transformation. We still had our moments. There were still the little things that triggered old patterns. Like when I made a decision she didn't agree with, or when she said something that felt too controlling. But instead of letting those moments define us, we learned to talk about them, to confront the discomfort head-on. There was one night, a few months after I had moved back in with her part-time, when we were sitting in the kitchen, just the two of us. She was making dinner, as she always did, and I was watching her, really watching her, in a way I had never done before. Can I ask you something? I said, breaking the silence. Of course, she replied, glancing over at me as she stirred a pot on the stove. She wasn't looking at me fully, but I could tell from her expression that she was listening. She always listened now. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I know you've had a hard time letting me go. I get it now, more than I ever did. But, why? Why did it have to be this way? Why didn't you trust me to make my own mistakes, to figure it out? She paused. The spoon in her hand stopped moving, and for a long moment, she didn't speak. I wasn't sure if she was processing my words, or if the question had struck a nerve, but I waited, patient. Finally, she sighed, setting the spoon down and turning to face me. I didn't know how. You were always so much better than I was at your age. You were smart, you were driven, and I was scared. Scared you would surpass me, scared you would leave me behind. Scared you wouldn't need me anymore. Her words landed with a weight that took me by surprise. For all the pain she had caused me, for all the control and manipulation, I hadn't realized that her actions had come from a place of fear. Fear of losing me, fear of not being enough. I didn't want you to make the same mistakes I made, she continued, her voice quieter now. I didn't want you to hurt, not in the way I did. But I see now that I hurt you in my own way. There it was, her apology, raw and real. And yet, something about it felt incomplete. It was almost as if I had expected her to offer a grand, sweeping apology, one that would erase all the pain, all the years of control. But that wasn't how this worked, was it? Healing didn't come with a single confession or a dramatic moment of change. Healing was messy, unpredictable, and slow. I don't know if I can ever completely forgive you for everything, I admitted, the words coming out as both painful and freeing. But I don't want to keep holding on to the past either. I want us to move forward. She nodded, her eyes softening with understanding. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. It's going to take time. For both of us. We sat in silence for a moment, just looking at each other, the weight of our conversation hanging between us. It wasn't the perfect closure I had imagined all those years ago. It wasn't a magical solution where everything was fixed in an instant. But it was progress. It was honesty. And it was the first real step toward healing we had ever taken together. As the evening wore on, we continued talking. The conversation shifted, as it always did with us, to the mundane things: what had happened that day, what I had been working on, what was for dinner. But the air between us was different. Lighter. Easier. And in that moment, I realized something: the road to healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning how to carry it with you, to accept that it had shaped you, but it didn't have to define you anymore. I knew I still had a lot of work to do, both in terms of my relationship with my mom and with myself. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But what I had learned was that growth wasn't linear. It didn't happen all at once, and it didn't happen without pain. But it was possible. And sometimes, the hardest part was just letting go of the anger, of the expectations, and allowing yourself to move forward. Months passed, and I began to find my own rhythm in this new version of my life. I had moved back to a place where I could be independent but also still feel connected to my mom. I found that balance, sometimes unsteady, sometimes fragile, but it was mine. It felt like the first step toward really living my own life, without being defined by anyone else's fears or expectations. There were moments when I still felt overwhelmed, when old patterns resurfaced, when I longed for the past, but I was learning to move through them. And as I continued to heal, I began to understand that it wasn't just my relationship with my mom that needed to heal, it was my relationship with myself. I had to learn how to trust my own voice, my own choices, and my own strength. One evening, months later, as I sat in the living room with my mom, watching the old shows we used to watch together, I realized something. We had both changed. We had both grown. And the love between us, complicated and imperfect, was real. It wasn't what I had expected or dreamed of when I was younger, but it was enough. The past didn't have to define us anymore. We were learning to write a new story together. And that was the story that mattered most. As we come to the end of today's video, I want to thank you for sticking around and joining me on this journey. If you found something in today's story that resonated with you, or if it made you think about your own experiences, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What do you want to see next? Drop your thoughts, suggestions, or any topics you're curious about in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going and build something meaningful together here on Bleak Bite. There's a lot more coming your way: stories, reflections, and deep dives into topics that I know you won't want to miss. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you're always in the loop. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care, and remember, the journey's just beginning.